Hello, my name is JJ Elliott. Welcome to my presentation on the history of the English language podcast, specifically episode 135, A House of Cards. Now, the original reason that I chose this is actually because I'm really into trading card games, but it was actually really interesting to follow this and see how they've developed. I would like to note that I kind of took the route of going through all of the information and writing notes. And then I have some notes off to the side that I'll be referring to for the implications of such things that have occurred. So getting into the printing press and cards, the reason that these two are placed together is because without a printing press or some type of printing method, there can be no cards. So around the early 1400s, there was the rise of the Lancasters when Henry IV overthrew Richard II, which reminded me of Shakespeare when I looked into it. And Lord Edmund, who was a young boy, was put on house arrest because he was technically next in line of the throne, but they didn't really want him to do that. After a while, he was allowed to maintain his own household once tensions kind of settled. But it was later discovered in some of his records that he was a big gambler. So the word cardus and cardus showed up in his records a lot. The T and the D show that they kind of use them interchangeably in language. And we can kind of see how this word evolved from Greek to Latin to English. So the way that they actually produced these cards was through stamps. So China had originally discovered this method a couple centuries prior, and they did it by carving out pieces of wood or stone. They'd carve out the negative space, and then they'd press it into ink, and then they'd press it into something that could be marked, like fabric or parchment. The way that this language evolved is that press came from the Latin word press, and then pressure, impression, imprint, all came from like these words. And then the word type came along, which actually came from Greek, which meant to leave an impression or imprint. That went to type, which meant image left by pressing or striking, and then type again, but the different English meaning, which means different types of things, which came from the Chinese characters, just them being so many different ones, because each symbol was a word instead of a letter. It kind of helped show how many different things there were. And this many letters actually caused it to not really be helpful for the Chinese to actually use a movable type or printing press, because there's just too many letters to create, and it actually would take the same amount of time. So through this process, the most beneficial thing was that they created money. And they used this money in the same way one would cards. They developed a game with 4 distinct suits based on a unit of currency, including coins, strings of coins, myriads of strings of coins, and groups of myriads of strings of coins. That's a mouthful. And as a result, a playing card had 4 different suits. So then this game got popular. And when I say it got popular, I mean it went on a whole Flat Stanley-esque journey. It traveled up the Silk Road to Egypt, where it changed a little bit. The cards got changed to gold coins, cups, swords, and polo sticks. They also adapted 3 court cards for the first time. It started as king, deputy, and under deputy. Then these cards traveled across the Mediterranean to Italy and Spain, where the polo sticks were exchanged for batons, and the courts were changed to king, knight, and knave. But the cards were hand-painted during this time, so it was still expensive. After this, it spread to other parts of Europe, but honestly, the church during this time didn't really like that, because these cards promoted gambling. And then Germany adopted the cards with 4 entirely new suits: hearts, bells, leaves, and acorns, and they were also the first in Europe to move to wooden block printing. It was seemingly independent of China, who had done it centuries prior, but with their new printing method, the cards became cheaper for everyone, which explains the design influence that the Germans had on modern cards, which we'll get to in a bit. But let's get back to some politics really quickly. So Edmund's cousin, the gambler from earlier, but actually his cousin, Henry IV, ruled over England as a second Lancastrian king, but tensions exploded in 1422 when the kings of England and France died around the same time, which put his son, in charge of both thrones. But the French didn't really like this. And Joan of Arc appeared. So Joan of Arc said that, hey, actually this French guy is supposed to be the rightful heir of the French throne, and I'm gonna fight for that. But unfortunately she died at the hands of the English and it kind of marked the end of the 100 Years' War. More importantly to what we're talking about, one of the prominent knights she was in a military campaign with, Lahir, wanted to bring card games back into favor. So he designed a game to entertain the king called Piquet. And then there was a long kind of discussion of a legend that involved him and cards. It says that he kind of invented card suits as we know them. Obviously, the hearts came directly from the German deck, but spades actually came from the German symbols for leaves, which kind of look like a pike or peak. So the French called them such. The connection to swords and pikes remained, so the English borrowed from the Italian word for spada and the Spanish word for sword, espada, and the evolution of the language to get to spade. However, English also already had the word spade, as in a shuffle, which the spade or German symbol for leaf already looked like, so it was kind of a crazy coincidence. And then clubs. That one's a little bit weirder. The French thought it looked like a clover or a trifle, but the French called it a club because the Latin deck had batons and they'd seen that influence. Then finally there's diamonds. So this one's the most difficult to explain. Some think it comes from the French word for tile, and others think that the suit could have connection to the original coins. But overall, it's said that Lahir kind of coined all of this. Now, without the invention of cards, I wouldn't have like the trading card games I love, obviously, but also we wouldn't have a lot of the books that we enjoy because the printing press was sort of in tandem invented with this. And I think that that's super interesting, especially looking at the modern advent of how people will create fakes of cards. And there's like certain printing things that you're supposed to pay attention to tell if a card is real. Specifically, in Magic the Gathering, if you look on the back of the card on the green orb, there's a L symbol in the light of red that tells you that the card is real, which I think is super interesting. Here's my works cited. Thanks for listening. Bye.